Hello, everyone. It is time for Grade 12 University, June 18th. And today we're going to finish Othello, so let's go do that. So, uh, right now we are on Act 5, the final act of the play. And we have Iago here who has a pretty simple plan. Well, maybe not simple, but the plan is that first of all he wants to kill Cassio, right? Literally ambush him in the night, and have the Othello then arrested for the murder of Desdemona. If those two are gone, right, he would be the natural successor to both of them, right? So in other words, uh, he would end up being the governor of the island and probably the general of the army and everything like that. So he would be on top, right? Because Othello appointed him as the lieutenant, right, and everything like that. So that's the plan. In order to do this, right, he is going to use uh Rodrigo, right? So this is on page 179. Act 5, Scene 1, line 11, where Iago says, I have rubbed this young quat almost to the sense, and he grows angry. Now, whether he kill Cassio, or Cassio him, or each do kill the other, every way makes my gain. Live Rodrigo, he calls me to a restitution large, of gold and jewels that I bobbed from him, as gifts to Desdemona. It must not be. If Cassio do remain, he hath a daily beauty in his life that makes me ugly, and besides the more may unfold me to him. There stand I in much peril. No, he must die, but so I hear him coming. So he wants basically everyone to die, right? He wants Cassio to die, and he wants Rodrigo to die in this fight as well. By the way, Rodrigo, all this time, right, who is not, again, a very smart person, has been giving Iago all sorts of jewels and gold and everything like that to give to Desdemona. And then Iago, of course, says, oh, yeah, I'll give them to her right away, right? And then he puts them in his pocket and never sees them again. And if Rodrigo asks, he says, oh, yeah, Desdemona really liked those jewels that I really gave her, right? So that's what Iago has been doing to Rodrigo. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this particular scene, right? Needless to say, Rodrigo goes after Cassio, and he's ambushing him in the night here. Uh, but Cassio beats him, right? He kicks his butt, right? Rodrigo makes a pass at Cassio, he misses, and then again draws and wounds Rodrigo, right? So you might remember that at the beginning of the play, when Iago was complaining about not getting the job, right? He was saying things that like Cassio doesn't know how to fight and that he's just an accountant and everything like that. Well, it turns out he was sort of lying about that, or maybe he was sort of mistaken or underestimating him, because Cassio takes out Rodrigo here um, just fine, right? It turns out that Cassio knows how to defend himself, right? Because Rodrigo uh, is wounded, right? He's down, and what ends up happening is Iago, from behind, stabs Cassio in the leg. Now, a leg injury, nowadays, if someone, now hopefully no one's going to stab you in the leg, but if someone stabbed you in the leg, you're probably not going to die, right? Because, you'll go to the hospital, you'll get yourself some stitches and everything like that. The way medicine is in Shakespeare's time, they knew how to, like, bandage a wound, but they didn't know about things like bacteria and, if any of you, I mean, we have Rita in our class who's the nurse. If someone has a significant cut, you're supposed to, disinfect the wound, make sure that it doesn't get bacteria in it and get an infection. They didn't know about that back then, right? So a leg injury like that could potentially kill the person, right? It could get infection, and then infection is going to kill the person, right? So Cassio being injured in the leg by Iago there is basically giving him a 50% chance to live or die, right? Like Cassio says, I am maimed forever. Help ho, murder, murder, right? So this is a dangerous wound, right? It's not a joke, right? Again, if it were today, if someone got stabbed in the leg and they went to hospital, you would expect them to be fine, right? Doctors can take care of that pretty easily. But in Shakespeare's time, this would not be a a good thing, right? It would be potentially bad, right? So Cassio's down, Rodrigo is down, and uh, Iago finishes the job with Rodrigo, right? So he pretends that he doesn't know this guy, and he says, "Oh, murder slave, oh villain," and he stabs Rodrigo, right? So again, that Lawrence Fishburne version of Othello is quite good for that, right? You can see him do that in real time. But ultimately, Iago comes out of this scene having most of the plan go pretty well, right? Rodrigo's dead, so he's not a problem. Cassio is injured and potentially fatally so, and the whole thing is something he manages to then pin on poor Bianca, right? You know, he says, "Oh, um, she's the one who did it all," right? This is on line 85, page 184. Gentlemen, all I do suspect this trash to be a party in this injury, right? So he sort of pins it all on Bianca, right? So things are going pretty well for Iago, right? Going straight into the last scene of the play, right? It seems like everything is working out for him. So that brings us back to Othello. So Act 5, Scene 2, right? Just at the beginning, Othello has a soliloquy, right? Even though Desdemona is there, right? Desdemona is asleep, so this is a soliloquy, right? And he is essentially trying to talk himself into doing this, right? And you can see he's talking about how beautiful Desdemona is, right? He even says, "Yet I'll not shed her blood, nor scar that whiter skin of hers than snow, and smooth its monumental alabaster. Yet she must die, else she'll betray more men." Right? So that line about saying that she's going to betray more men is interesting, right? Because it seems to imply that you can't just divorce her, because if you do, she's going to do this all over again, right? So that is where we're at for that one. So, uh, he is kissing her, right, while she's asleep, right? And he says this line on line 17: "Bombing breath that doth almost persuade justice to break her sword. One more, be thus when thou art dead, and I will kill thee and love thee after. One more, and this the last, so sweet was never so fatal. I must weep, but they are cruel tears. This sorrow's heavenly. It strike where it doth love. She wakes." So, Othello here is uh, getting ready to kill Desdemona. Where's right here? And the question I would call your attention to, right, and I'm glad to see that a couple of you are going for this in your essays, is, does he actually love Desdemona, right? So he's talking about how beautiful she is and how he's going to kiss her and that he's going to love her after killing her, but he still means to kill her, right? And he still thinks he has the right to kill her. So one of the central questions of this play, right, and this is something we will discuss tomorrow during our final group meeting, is, does Othello look at Desdemona as his wife, or is she simply a piece of property, right? And, well, here, he is talking a lot about how he loves her, but again, he is about to murder her. And it's always an interesting question of, if Desdemona had done all of the things Iago had said, right? All of those lies were actually true, and she was with Cassio and everything like that. Well, most likely, I think most of you will agree that she probably doesn't deserve to die for that, right? It would be a bit extreme, right? It would be like killing the mother in Gravel, right? Just because she went with that guy, Neil, right? A lot of you were angry at her. Some of you said to send her to jail, but I don't think no one said that she should die. Right? That would be a little bit extreme. Sorry. Nevertheless, Desdemona here is loyal to the death. Right? So Othello is here and he's about to kill her. Right? She says, "Talk you of killing." Othello says, I do. Then heaven have mercy on me. Amen with all my heart. If you say so, I hope you will not kill me. Hum, and yet I fear you, for you are fatal then. So, Desdemona sort of pleads with him to not be killed, and, sort of says, don't kill me tomorrow, and everything like that. But the important thing here is Othello, it says here he stifles her, and if you've seen the movie version, you'll know that that means that he's choking her to death, right? And the idea of that is that what he said earlier, that he doesn't want, she's so beautiful that he doesn't want to leave a permanent scar, so he's just going to choke her to death so that he doesn't, like, make her bleed or something. So he does that, and she's not quite dead when Emilia comes in. Right? And Desdemona's last word in the play, right? Some of the last things she says, the last line she has is on line 123, page 195, Act 4, Scene 2, line 123, where Emilia asks, "Oh, who hath done this deed?" And Desdemona's last line in the play is, "Nobody, I myself, farewell, commend me to my kind lord, oh, farewell." So, this is what I mean by loyal to the death, right? So even after being murdered for no reason by her husband, right? She knows very well that her husband had no reason to murder her, right? She is still loyal to this guy, and with her dying breath, she says, "I killed myself," right? Meaning that Othello should not get in trouble, right? Because, I did it to myself, right? So she doesn't, even when Othello has done all of these bad things to her, she's still doing whatever she can to protect and defend her husband, right? So remember that word for Desdemona that we often use is, she's the dutiful wife, right? She sees it as her sacred duty to be dutiful to her husband, and she even takes that to the far extreme of being dutiful to him after he murders her. Right? So that is the end of Desdemona here, killed at Othello's hand. So that brings us to Emilia. And for those of you who are doing essays based on racism, right, which is a lot of you, right, I want you to pay close attention to this part because it's going to be useful in many of your essays, most likely. So, Emilia, right? Let's just look at this very scene. Before Othello is exposed as a murderer, right? Before he sort of owns up to it, and before Emilia knows what's going on, you'll notice the way Emilia talks to him, where she says, "My good lord," right? And "my lord," right? "Cassio, my lord, hath killed a young Venetian," right? And everything like that, right? So she always would refer to Othello as "my good lord" or "my lord" or something along those lines when she talks to him, right? So she was very, very respectful there. But, when Othello confesses, right? And he says on line 128, "She's like a liar, gone burning to hell. 'Twas I that killed her." Let's see what happens. So let me just look at this. "Oh, the more angel she, and you the blacker devil. She turned to folly, and she was a whore. Thou dost belie her, and thou art a devil. She was as false as water. Thou art rash as fire to say that she was false. Oh, she was heavenly true. Cassio did top her as thy husband else." So wait, so hold on. Sorry, got distracted for a second, but let's get back to it. So on the next page, Emilia says, "Thou hast not half power to do me harm as I have to be hurt. O gull, O dolt, as ignorant as dirt, thou hast done a deed. I care not for thy sword, I'll make thee known. Though I lost 20 lives, help, help, ho, help. The Moor hath killed my mistress, murder, murder." So, you'll notice the change in language. Obviously, the guy's a murderer. You're not going to call him my lord anymore. But she's using things like blacker devil, right? Right, calling him a devil again. And then down here on line 161, right, page 197 in the PDF, Act 4, Scene 2, 161, right, calling him things like ignorant as dirt. And most sort of tellingly at all, she doesn't say Othello hath killed my mistress. She says the Moor hath killed my mistress, right? So what we're seeing there is some racial language all of a sudden coming out, right? She's gone from calling him my lord to calling him the Moor, right? And that, I think, has some significance. Once Othello became a criminal, once he sort of became a someone who has done something wrong, sort of lost his position in society, all of a sudden he is no longer my lord. He's no longer even Othello, right? All of a sudden it's Moor, right? So racial language comes out after he has done that, right? And I definitely think there's something you could say about that in the essays, right? So give that some thought, right? You definitely could comment on that. But Emilia here, there's more to say about her, right? Because Emilia is, well, let's see. She is the one that brings Iago's plots to an end, right? So, first she calls everyone when Othello says, "Shut up, leave, go away," right? And even threatens her life. Emilia calls everyone over, and she confronts Iago, right? And she tells everyone what the deal is, right? Because Iago says, "Come, hold your peace," right? This is page 201, line 217, right? Act 4, Act 5, Scene 2, line 217. "Come, hold your peace." Emilia says, twill out, I peace. No, I will speak as liberal as the north. Let heaven and men and devils, let them all cry shame against me, yet I'll speak. Be wise and get you home. I will not. And then Iago literally pulls a sword on her. "Fie, your sword upon a woman." And Emilia says, "Oh, thou dull Moor." There it is again, by the way, Moor. "That handkerchief thou speakest of, I found by fortune, and did give my husband, for often with a solemn earnestness, more than indeed belonged to such a trifle, he begged of me to steal it." Right? So she exposes Iago here. She refuses to do what Desdemona would do and be loyal to her husband, and instead she, well, tells the truth, right? She, once people know that Iago arranged the theft of the handkerchief, then, well, his role in this whole thing is exposed, right? So she wrecks Iago's plan here. So, there's a question you can ask here, right? And some of you were interested in writing in the woman aspect of the play, right? And there's definitely something to say here. And we'll talk about this tomorrow too, by the way. This is one of the things we'll discuss in the seminar tomorrow. Is Emilia the hero of the play, right? Because she does expose Iago and stop this guy's plans from working, right? Everything was going well until Emilia spoke up. But, of course, we should know from earlier She could have done this a lot earlier if she'd wanted to. She witnessed what was going on with the handkerchief, right? So she definitely saw, even if she didn't know exactly why she was stealing the handkerchief, she saw what it did, right? So she saw the effect it had going on, right? So depending on how you want to look at this play, you could look at it as Emilia's the hero who took a stand, or you could look at it as someone who just acted a bit too late, right? So that's sort of, again, that's something we can definitely discuss later. Oops. So, nevertheless, Iago is now exposed, and he kills Emilio before he is um, able to be captured, right? But we're now in the final bit of the play, so let me talk about that briefly. So, first of all, on page 207, Othello says, I look down upon, this is on line 284, I look down towards his feet, but that's a fable. If that thou beest a devil, I cannot kill thee. And then he wounds Iago by stabbing him with a steroid, and Iago says, I bleed, sir, but not killed. So, this particular scene is very important, right? Because, especially to those of you who are interested in the symbolism or the religious part of the play, right? You can't kill the devil, right? The devil, no one can go and stab the devil or anything like that, right? You can't kill the devil. And Iago, even though Othello, Desdemona, um, Emilia, right? They're all dead, right? But Iago is actually the one who's going to survive in the play, right? He's captured and he's going to be tortured and everything like that. But Iago doesn't actually die, right? And the reason for that is because, well, you can't. You can't kill the devil, right? So that is sort of part of the significance of that particular scene, right? So if you're interested in writing about the religious aspect of the play, which not many of you are, it seems, so far, but you can if you want. But if you're interested in that symbolism, right, there you go. Now, Iago's last line in the play are sort of magnificent, right? They're sort of typical Iago here. He says, "Demand me nothing, what you know, you know. From this time forth, I will never speak word." Right? That's after Othello asks him why he has done that. Right? So essentially, when Othello asks for an explanation why he has done this, what he has done, right? His answer is, I'm not going to tell you. Right? And you should understand that last thing that he says there. It is his last line in the play. That he is doing that in order to torture Othello just a little bit more. Right? Essentially, him saying, um, I'm not going to just tell you what's going on because that would at least give you some closure. So I'm going to deny you even that, right? So until the very end, he is trying to torture Othello. Now, the last thing that happens in the play, of course, is that Othello kills himself, right? And he gives a speech at the end where he says, soft you a word or two before you go. This is on page 209, line 337. I have done the state some service, and they know it. No more of that, I pray you, in your letters, when you shall these unlucky deeds relate, speak of me as I am, nothing extenuate, nor set down aught in malice. Then must you speak of one that loved not wisely, but too well, of one not easily jealous, but being wrought, perplexed in the extreme, of one whose hand, like the base Indian, threw a pearl away richer than all of his tribe, of one most whose subdued eyes, albeit unused to the melting mood, dropped tears as fast as the Arabian trees their medicinal gums. Set you down this, and say besides that in Aleppo once, where a malignant and turbaned Turk beat a Venetian and introduced the state, I took by the throat the circumcised dog and smote him thus, right? So you basically, if you could summarize his last speech in a couple of words, it would be, yes, I killed my wife. Yes, I was way too jealous and everything like that. But I also fought in wars for Venice, so remember me for that as well. And then he kills himself. Right? So Othello commits suicide for what he has done, and at the end of the play, like many Shakespearean tragedies, you end up with a bunch of bodies stacked up on the stage, right? So it ends with basically a bloodbath, right? So, a couple of you have asked me or requested to do questions about the idea of a tragic flaw. So the idea of a tragic flaw is when a character is mostly perfect but has a flaw that causes their downfall, right? That is a very common Shakespeare essay, right? You know, we often get that in all sorts of different Shakespeare plays. So what I would say about um, that particular idea is, sure, you can focus on something like that. Just know that it's sort of overdone. But that being said, Othello's tragic flaw, of course, is that he has too much love, he was obsessed, or that he was jealous, right? That's his tragic flaw. You could also argue that his tragic flaw, I guess, could be trusting the wrong people, right? But nevertheless, that's his tragic flaw, whereas Macbeth's tragic flaw is too much ambition and everything like that, right? If you want to write a tragic flaw essay, you can, right? But just so you know, I consider those to be a little boring, right? So I've been sort of telling people that if you do a tragic flaw essay, boring. Anyway, so nevertheless, it is a story that ends with a bunch of bodies on the stage, right? And all of Shakespeare's tragedies will usually end like that. Hamlet ends like that. King Lear ends like that, right? All of the tragedies end with a bunch of bodies on the stage. So everyone is dead, and that's not very common nowadays in theater or anything like that, right? It's not often you watch a movie where everyone's dead at the end, right? But it was considered part of theater at the time, right? And should I talk? I'll talk about it real fast before I finish this video. You know, the reason people like this, right, is because of the feeling of what's called catharsis, right, which is when you experience something negative in on stage, so you don't have to feel it in your life, right? So catharsis is essentially, you go and you cry in the theater so you don't have to go and cry in your real life, right? So that was a popular thing, right? So that's why Shakespeare would do this, right? So very often Shakespeare's plays would end with a bunch of bodies on the stage, right? Not all of them, right? He had comedies too and everything like that, but that's sort of part of why that idea is much less popular nowadays, right? The idea that we watch things for catharsis, not many people do, but it nevertheless is part of the logic of why this ending the way it is. So that brings us to the end of the play and to the end of my videos about it. So tomorrow we're going to have our last Google meeting, right? Oh, I should put it's at 2 o'clock, right? So it's Friday, June 19th at 2 p.m., right? You know where, right? In the Google meeting. And we'll be talking about Othello, and we'll also be talking about essays, okay? So, we will talk about, especially Emilia's racial language and Emilia's exposing Iago, right? But we'll also talk about some other things. So that's the plan for that, and I hope that you guys have managed to enjoy the play. I also hope that you guys have managed to watch it. And yeah, we will finish it there, and keep sending me essay questions. Many of you look like you're really plugging along, so well done to you, each of you. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. So see you then. Take care.